All right, teammates. We are back once again. If this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the number one show on innovative team. We're great to have you. Hope your New Year's getting off to a great start. To my regular listeners, you already know how we get down here. You already know what happens when you hit the play button on this show. Whatever the challenge is, whatever the obstacle is, whatever it is you feel like is getting in the way of your success, we are here to indirectly tell you you are not going through it alone. And I got to tell you, it's very, now all my interviews are rewarding. Every time I hit the record button on this show, it's incredibly rewarding to connect with folks. But today it hits a little different because it was just on this show that I even learned what a fractional CFO is. It was, and you guys heard me learn. You guys heard me learn what it was right here live on camera. And today we have another fractional CFO who has come up and has come into the business space, helping more so specifically small business owners, manufacturing companies, and really is about teaching people certain things that they may not need to do just by existing. So all that being said, Stewart Ervin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, one. Appreciate you having me.
Yes, and just to get things started, man, I think the best way, and I was listening to you on several shows before we started recording. So, I think the best way to start off is just go back. Let's take it back to the beginning, man, because
Yeah.
you have an interesting story about how you actually got on. You were working for a company and it was like you were helping out the suppliers, and essentially you built up enough of a relationship with those suppliers that gave you the confidence to go build your own thing. And I think that's so important for people to know because many times people work a job, they get the check every 2 weeks, and they do whatever with it. They don't realize that it's in the building the relationships with the actual customers and the consumers and the clients that might allow them something bigger in the future. So why don't you kind of go back there and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so that's the one thing I've always said, and it's a little bit because I was kind of brought up through the supply chain purchasing realm. But I always say you should have your external customers, which are your suppliers, so on and so forth. They should be treated just as good as your internal guys. And so,
1,000%.
um, I was working the corporate arena in the supply chain world, primarily in aerospace, and it was a new program, and we were trying to identify new suppliers that could come on board and help. And again, I was always fair. I was always fair with anybody who I brought on board. But part of my job at the time was also to help suppliers turn their businesses around. And so there was one particular supplier that I brought on board early on in the program. We needed some help with some stuff. He performed very well, but 4 years later, he had kind of gotten comfortable and started to lose control of his business. And so then they said, Stuart, you need to go in there and fix the same guy that you brought on board 4 years ago. So I was inside his facility for a good, I'd say 6 months, trying to get him back on track to support the program. And it was in that time frame that he approached me about coming and helping him turn his business around. So this certain situation was he thought he was about 70% diversified into this particular supplier that I was actually working for. And he's like, I want to sell my company, but I'm obviously my books aren't clean. No one wants to buy a one customer business, and I just need some help. He was naturally a sales guy, and he knew I was a finance and ops guy. And he said, if you'll come in and run my business for me, I can exit and go sell and diversify the business and sell it. And he said, I've watched you over these last 6 months, and I really appreciate the way you do things. I really appreciate the way you run the business. You really have a heart for it. You have a knack for numbers,
Mhm.
and I think you're my guy. And that was the break. And so I had spent 4 years as a turnaround guy, like at a supplier level, and this was my first opportunity to say, hey, let's try to turn an entire business around. And that
Mhm.
was my break, right? So I stepped out and helped him turn his business around, and I helped him diversify, and ultimately ended up selling the business.
Now before before he approached you, did you even know what a fractional CFO was? Because it's a term that is really not that common until you
Yeah.
actually meet someone that does it, and you realize, man, you might think it's a consultant. You might say, because there's a lot of stubborn business owners out there that say, oh, well, I hire a consultant and I hire someone to do this. But the term fractional CFO is kind of in a lane of in itself. So can you kind of dive into what you educated yourself on how what that position is and what exactly is going to make you different than a competitor?
Yeah, so I had at that time I had no clue what a fractional CFO was. I actually looked back at my notes and I think I came across the term fractional executive in like the 2017-18 timeframe.
Right, which isn't
And
even
so,
that far, like not that long ago.
no, heck no. And I wrote it down. And so the reality was up until about I don't know, a year and a half ago, my job primarily was going in and turning businesses around. So I was a turnaround guy.
There it
But I
is.
always go back to what I wanted to do from a very early age was I wanted to own a variety of businesses.
Hmm.
Well, now I realize it takes a lot of money to do that. And so when I stumbled across the term fractional executive, I thought that's the way to do it there. If I can't own it, I can at least help run them. Right. And it's even though I don't own it, it's really kind of one and the same. And so I started really building up my strategic side because I was very good on the tactical side of things and I was turning businesses around and everything was going well. And then I just made the decision I wanted to get out in front of the problems and become the individual who helps businesses before they need to hire me.
Yeah.
And so I was doing research and I realized that the fractional CFO was the most widely used term. For
Hmm.
me, I am a operations centric CFO, meaning I understand numbers like backwards and forwards, and they tell a story. But I can do much more than understand the numbers. I can go on the operations side and tell you how to dial it in. And so the beauty about a fractional executive is your business can get a seasoned CFO, COO, whatever you want to, whatever avenue you want to go down for a fraction of a price. And that helps great in these small businesses that either A, can't afford a full time CFO or COO. They don't need a full time guy, but they say, hey, I'd like to, glean off some of your experience. And sometimes they just say, hey, I just need someone to kind of come alongside of me and be a little more than what a coach is. Like,
Yeah.
really insert yourself in my business and help me run the business. And again, all of that is a fraction of a cost that gets a pretty decent impact.
Yeah, and on that point of wanting to own multiple businesses, guys, you got to understand there's a lot of credence there. Some of the greatest business minds in the world, whether it's the Warren Buffetts, the Robert Kiyosaki's, you insert the name, whatever owner you like, they weren't just one business. They knew how to manage a lot of different things because they stayed in their lane and their principles, I'm gonna say it again, the principles remained the same and the system was intact. And I come from the sports background. One of the things that actually really drew me to your work is I like the logo with the X's and O's, and
Mm,
you're really heavy into sports. You're a big sports fan. And my first job out of college, Irvin, I was a college scout for a company named National Scouting Report. So the way the company worked is they would, because it was commission work, they would basically tell you, know that the people that you're recruiting have the money and then go recruit them. So the reason it didn't
mm,
work out with me and them is because I would actually go to games not knowing anybody, go see who can play, and then write them down, and then go meet with the parents and all that. And as I was listening to you tell your story and what makes you different is you don't have conversations with the business owners that you serve until you
no,
see their numbers. You
that's
go
right.
through their numbers, you go through their numbers, you make sure they can't give you no BS with their story, and this is what we're gonna try. No, you look at the numbers, and then you start to say, okay, this is how I can help. So can you just walk us through your process because I thought
Yeah.
that was incredibly excellent, especially for any owners out there to be, if you're really serious about going and hiring the right people.
Yeah. So the ultimate goal is this is going to be a win-win for each, right? So I got to make sure that they're fit for me and I got to make sure that I can actually serve them. So my goal is to give you an 8 to 10x return on the investment in my services, right? So
Mhm.
how I start with that is I look at their 3 years of financials and I go cash flow, P&L, and balance sheet. And I ask no questions. I just say if there's interest and we've kind of vetted each other out and say, okay, let's take this thing to the next level. We've entered into all the NDAs. They send me their 3 years of financials, and I tell them I don't want to talk to you at all. I'm going to let the numbers do the talking, and it is going to result in one or two things. You're either going to confirm what I tell you, or either if there's a disconnect from what I'm telling you, that means your numbers aren't correct. Either way, it's a good jumping off point, and so that's what I do. I do an analysis, and basically
Mhm.
I meet with when we kind of do our first face to face or really kind of get into okay, this is going to move forward. I
Right.
tell them this is the state of your business. This is what it looks like over the last 3 years. And 99% of the time, they confirm what I'm telling them. And now this gives me a starting point to say, okay, well, these are the areas, at least on a financial basis, that we need to start working on.
Mhm.
Traditionally, the financial issues will lead into an operational discussion that will say, okay, now here's our true jumping off point that we want to do. But
Mhm.
either way, I'll let the numbers do the talking. I learn all about the business, and I wait for the leader or owner to confirm what I'm actually looking at on the numbers.
So can you speak a little bit to the resistance that you may feel by going through that process? And I ask this because like I'm back in the fitness and athletics days. I've unfortunately and fortunately, if you think about it, worked for six gyms that went out of business. I mean,
Hmm.
owners completely stubborn, and I'm telling you, this was the problem, and they would completely ignore it because they had it in their mind that they were just going to do things their way, and you see what the results are. So I
Yeah.
know the feeling of talking to business owners and telling them, hey, this is the way it's going to work, but they are so, and part of what makes them a business owner is being stubborn, but it gets to the point where it's like there's
Yeah.
nothing. So the resistance that you may feel and the challenges that come up with that, can you kind of speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, so I've had to actually end relationships because of it, right? So
Mhm.
that's why the onboarding process is so critical. But a lot of times what you'll find is the business owner thinks they want to do X, Y, and Z until they get in the middle of doing X, Y, and Z. And
Right.
there's been times that I've told them, look, I appreciate it, but you're probably better off staying at this level because that's your comfort level. You're never going to do, and you're not going to feel comfortable operating at this level, right?
And
And
then
so
prime example, not to cut you off there, but your first client, he admitted he's the sales guy. He admitted he
that's
knew
right,
how to sell, and then your operations side. So everything boils down to teamwork, guys. Everything boils down to
100%.
staying in your lane and then letting the kind of delegating and doing the things that everybody else is an expert at. So anyway, go ahead. I mean, I just want to make sure I made that point.
Yeah, no. So actually, uh, parlays well into what I was about to say. Is what I'm actually finding is a lot of the business leaders, they're technical experts. They started this business because they're good at X, Y, and Z,
Right.
and nearly every one of them will tell you, I hate finance and I really don't like running the business side. And
Hmm.
Bracket really was started back in 2008, 2009 to somewhat solve that problem. It existed as a business as a service, and we ran the business so you could do what you wanted to do. It
Hmm.
was only again in 2019 that we really reframed it up into a fractional CFO setup, but that's why we added all the strategy stuff. But what I'm doing is I'm filling in the gap in the weaknesses that the owner has. And
Hmm.
as unique as a fractional CFO, I'm a member of their management team, but I have to bounce up and somewhat act as a member of their board or whatever the case may be, and coach the leader or owner of the business, step back down and be a member of the management team, so on and so forth. But it's really all meant to complete the gaps of the owners by filling me in with the typically the finance and operational piece.
And I remember actually the first time I heard the phrase working in your business and instead of working
Hmm.
on your business. This was is what 6 or 7 years ago now. I was
Yeah.
at a Tony Robbins event and he said that and it has stuck. And that's something I've heard you repeat on multiple occasions. Can you elaborate a little bit on that when you run into these same problems that we're discussing when it comes to clients? Because you're right, when it gets to the point where you as an owner, you start being in the business, you start losing that perspective on the business, a whole lot can all hell can break loose for you.
Yeah.
Telling you right now, numbers wise, profit, the whole thing. So,
Yeah. So traditionally, before someone would have called me, they're going to have reached a ceiling. They're going
mhm,
to either reach a growth ceiling. Sometimes they're actually going backwards. So what you'll find is that stress will kick in, emotions will kick in, and the owner or the leader is going to go where they're comfortable. They're going to dive into the weeds, and they
but yeah,
typically
but
have
they know they're
sat.
technical, right? Yeah, that's
Yeah, they have sat in the weeds. They're
mhm,
down trying, man, something's not working. Either we're not executing the sales right, or we're not doing the service or install, whatever the case may be, right?
mhm,
So they're down deep in the weeds and they've sat there for several months and have lost sight of actually what's going on in their business. And now all of a sudden their business is out of control. And
right.
so my number one goal is to come in and help them come up out of the weeds and start looking forward. And the way we do that is we develop an annual plan or an annual budget to get the business owner to stop looking only at the results and try to put a plan forward and drive the business forward. And that's how we do that. Once you somewhat have a plan and a forecast, you'll start missing things. And then that's when I would direct the leader to say, hey, this is something worthy of working on. Get
Mhm,
out of that meeting, get out of those emails, get off that email chain, let someone else delegate and do that. Let's focus on this because this is your biggest issue right now that's
mhm,
creating profit leaks, lack of sales, so on and so forth. And that's how I really try to drive it. And they'll be like, I know I've got to get out of the weeds, and I say, no, there's no but. If
mhm.
you fix this, watch what happens. And it's really just they just need someone to come alongside them and express it, and they typically know it, but you have to continuously hold them accountable. Stop doing that. Get off that email chain.
Mhm.
And let someone else do that. And eventually, once we have a couple months of the planning and the forecast and financial analysis behind us, then they start to recognize, all right, now I'm at where I need to be. I'm more comfortable, and we just go from there.
No, you mentioned it actually officially started in 2008, and from the time that was I was a sophomore in college at that point. And from 2008 to now, we're in 2025.
Hmm.
The world of social media has changed everything, technology, AI, the way Chat GPT works. There's a lot of people now that can use the internet to outsource a lot of the work. However, you still have to have a human brain to work
Yeah.
these things. How has your business been able to adjust with all these changes, knowing that you actually have technology and you can help people and you can counsel people on these things?
Yeah. So I use Chat GBT with the best of them. Um,
I
I'm,
actually just started doing that this past couple months. It was somebody else who was on the show, and I'm a creator. I was
yeah.
stubborn. I ain't using that, dog. I ain't doing it.
Yeah.
He goes, look, man, I loaded up all my blogs, I loaded up everything I wrote, and I put it in Chat GPT, and I said, make it sound like me, and it tripled my like results and the amount of productivity. I did the same thing, and now you see article after article come out every single day. It used to only be once a week. Now it's
Mm,
every single day. So I'm like,
yeah.
listen, I hear you, man.
Yeah. So I use it religiously every day, multiple times a day. But the reality is, at this point in time, you
Mhm.
still do need the human intervention. Because again, a lot of these guys I deal with, they don't deal with Chat GPT. They're small businesses. They're just like, hey, they've never. So a lot of them have never even had formal education beyond high school, and they just kind of go do their thing. And so,
Mhm.
um, I'm an advocate. I use it. I tell them that I use it, and I actually show them how I do the prompts, and so on and so forth. So I'm embracing it because I've recognized that all it is doing is making me better at what I'm already good at, right? And so I've learned that it's still you can dump the prompts in there, but you have to have the real life experience to understand how to make Chat GPT do your thing, right?
Yes.
And that really goes for all the financing and bookkeeping and all that stuff.
Mhm.
It's all fine and dandy. All that stuff can be fairly automated, but it's taking the numbers and turn it into a story where a non-financial person can understand it and
Right.
and make it to how it fits their business. And then they go, now I see. So again,
Right.
there's a lot of AI and automation in everything that I do, but I'm more or less a storyteller.
Exactly. Exactly. And when it comes to the story that I mean, the importance of the story when it comes to business, because that's what sells. And one of the things I heard you talking about early on a previous show is the importance of sales specifically. Like everybody is a seller, no matter what, you have to embrace your ability to sell. Can you speak on how you've been able to communicate that with business owners? Because I know a ton of them. They have the nicest logos, the greatest
Hmm.
websites, the greatest merch, the t-shirts, everything, but they do not sell because it gets them out of their comfort zone. So can you
Yeah,
speak on how you're at least able to communicate the importance of sales before you even go get a tax ID, before you even go register the business? You got to go figure out who you're going to sell it to, or if
that's
it's
right.
going to sell anything, sell it all. Go sell
Yeah,
it, man. Go sell it. But I'll let you
yeah.
talk because I've vented about that for years.
Yeah. So what we do is we have like some key plays that we execute. And the
Yeah, you
second
ain't
play
like
we
a
learned,
system about it, right?
yeah, the second play that we've already touched on was the annual plan. Again, so that is a driving forward, right? And what we normally do is it's okay, what is it? What is your current sales today? And let's just say they're 10 million. That's okay. Let's work together to develop a good plan of what do you want to be next year. And so we say, okay, let's shoot for 12 million. So then I'll explain to them you currently have $1 million in your backlog. That means you've got to go find $11 million. And a lot of times, like, oh, I have no clue. So that's when we get into the conversations of the SWOT analysis. We go in through your niche, making sure you have your niche defined. What's your unique offering? Because our goal, which is play number three, is to develop a 2 to 3x sales funnel, which most of them have never heard of a CRM or a sales funnel or anything. And I'm telling them, if you want to be 12 million, it's not going to happen by chance.
Yes.
You need to go find $24 million worth of ideas that hopefully you can get 12 million drip through the bottom. And so
Hmm.
we just that's the exercise that we go through. We put in quarterly strategic offsite meetings and we
Hmm.
start driving forward. And one of the bigger key metrics that we put in place is bookings.
Hmm.
You want to be at $12 million, you got 1 million, you better be booking $1 million a month. And we track every week how we're working towards that. So I let the data do the talking.
Yeah.
And if they really want to be 12 million, they'll get out and sell.
Yeah, and in that to that point, because I know personally for me, sales can be a little intimidating for a lot of
Yeah.
people because you're approaching people that you don't know. Yes, you're gonna get told no, probably more, way more than you're gonna get told yes. You are gonna constantly make calls to people ain't gonna want to talk to you. Sales defenses go up immediately. But when you
Mhm.
have a system in place and you work a system, that rejection is so much easier to get off of. Well, first
Yeah,
of all, you got to believe in what you're doing. All right. You got
that's
to
right.
believe in your actual service, and you wouldn't be an owner if you didn't believe in exactly what you're offering. But when you have a system along with that belief, then you're going to just keep firing away. You're going to keep making calls and making calls and making calls because you know exactly what you're offering. And nowadays, again, you don't have to necessarily pick up one of these. I would recommend you do it, but if you can, fire off on ChatGPT, hey, 10 emails a day go here. I'm going to go meet someone at a Starbucks. I'm going to go do things to where I can personally have that personal touch. And, all that being said, I want to be very respectful of your time. Can you just speak a little bit on the ideal company that you work with? Because when it comes to fractional CFOs, it's more so mid-size. It doesn't have to be these major companies that have, hundreds of millions of dollars as a budget to bring on a CFO, COO.
Yeah.
I'll let you kind of speak on the ideal company that you're working with.
Well, I also want to add a little bit to the
Yeah, go
sales side too. So I suck at sales. I have tried everything. I've
ahead.
used Chat GPT. I suck at sales, and I realized that. And so I went out and hired a sales coach. And so that's one thing I definitely would recommend. If you recognize that you're sucking at sales and you're not converting, which is what I did, I have tried everything under the sun.
Mm-hmm.
Go hire a sales coach because it's been amazing at the transformation that even mentally that I've gone through by hiring a sales coach. And he told me, it's like, look, man, you're a 1+1 brain. 1+1 = 2 to you. There's no gray area. You're a black and white guy. Your brain will not equate 1+1 = 3. That's the creative portion that you're missing in your brain. So if
Listen,
you're
the judge sustain. If I had to go sustain, you're
yeah,
not good at something, go hire a damn
go
coach
hire.
and then go hire a coach. Why not?
Yeah.
I mean, you got to admit it. If you really serious about your business, go hire a coach and get better at it.
Yeah.
Man, thank you for adding that.
And they're reasonably priced. I mean, obviously you got some guys that are out there, but go hire a legit business coach, a sales
Mhm.
coach that can help you fill in the gap. Not some marketing people. No, a legit person that's going to put you through the paces for you to understand. I mean, again, understand your market dominating position, understand who identify all your clients, your target clients, which we get into now, and then
Right.
you can really put a whole plan in place. And so for me, my target client is a manufacturing company,
Mhm.
less than 30 million, so between 1 to 30 million in sales.
Right.
But the biggest kicker is the owner must want to grow. They must want to grow. If there's no desire to grow, then the relationship will not work. And
Yes.
so there's been, again, too many times where it's like, I think I want to be X. Now you need to be for sure that you want to be X. And I can help you make sure you maximize that. So again, the manufacturing sector, between 1 to $30 million, we're good to go.
All right, so folks, what we just witnessed again is an example of, first of all, knowing what you're good at, but secondly, knowing exactly who you want to serve, knowing your avatar. You guys have heard me, the regular listeners at least have heard me talk about that on multiple occasions. Knowing your avatar to the point where you know exactly how much they're making, what it is they want to do, and you can spot the person. You don't have to be, and to be 100% honest with you, sir, you don't have to be great at sales if you
Mm.
have the mindset of knowing exactly who you're going to want to serve, because the person that you're talking about, you don't want to come off as salesy. You don't want to come off as oh, I just want to get this money from you. You want to come off as a genuine person, like you just mentioned. You're making this amount. Whoever's listening to this right now and heard that number, they're like, oh, that's me. We
Yeah.
talking to me. You ain't even telling me. That's my boy right there.
Yeah.
And you have that mindset, you really won't have to be uncomfortable in an uncomfortable, sleazy sales conversation. It's when you start veering off and trying to catch people and play games with people, that's when everything goes out of whack. So I commend you for knowing your numbers and knowing exactly who that avatar is. I cannot
Yeah.
stress the importance of that. So, all that being said, you sort of already mentioned this a little bit. Can you just tell people a little bit what's next, what's coming down the pipeline, what's the future hold for the company?
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about on other shows or whatever, but we talk about the 6 key plays of business. And so what you're going to see in the future is
I'll tell you the sports stuff, man. The sports analogy. I
yeah,
loved it. As I was listening to you,
I
man.
love it. I love it. Yeah. And so you're going to see that really come to the forefront. So part of what I'm working with the coach is really defining and finalizing those plays, and you're going to see more of that in the future.
Right.
Try to make it a little more of a operating playbook per se, and we're finalizing that. So that's really what the future holds. It's going to continue to grow.
Hmm.
Again, you may see some operating system stuff come out that are a little bit come out of the bracket arena.
Okay.
But again, it's really the plays that I've used over the last decade, 15 years of once I got a business healthy, what was the main focus that we worked on after that, which was play six, which is value creation. So it's really kind of a twofold deal of getting your business healthy through plays one through five, and then play six is about creating value in your business.
And what is the best way for people to get in touch with you if they would like to hear more?
So I'm super active on LinkedIn, Stewart Ervin, Ervin, or you can check my website out, Bracket MGMT, which is short for management, bracketmgmt.com.
Great. And all of that will be included in the show notes as well. So, Stuart, the final thing I do to close out all the shows is want you to use your imagination a little bit. You are back to, I guess, 2004 time. You're helping out this supplier. He's seeing the way you work. You're not really sure what's going on next. So I want you to pretend that that version of Stuart has come into the Zoom room. Give him some words of encouragement, and we will officially close.
Yeah. So the words of encouragement is you're going to have a long road. You're going to screw up a lot, and just understand that every failure is actually going to make you better. And
Yeah.
that's not cliche. It's for real. So just stick with it, learn, pick yourself up, just dust your knees off and keep grinding.
And the mic officially drops with that. Everyone out there, fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.